Welcome to the Superhero Sidekick Leadership Coaching Podcast with Joel Smith and Joe Baker. We're here to help you develop your superpowers. This is the Superhero Sidekick Coaching Podcast. I'm Joel Smith.
I'm Joe Baker. We're not here to be the superhero. We just want to be your sidekick and help you along in building your business, building your not-for-profit. Let's help you grow it fast and really scale.
Be sure to check us out on Facebook and visit us at superherosidekick.com. This is the Superhero Sidekick Coaching Podcast. I am Joel Smith. My co-host, Joe Baker, unfortunately is not with us today. He is probably off climbing a mountain with his son. Who knows? But he is an adventure geek, so I'm sure he's having fun, whatever he's doing. So, hey, in our virtual studio today, I've got a friend of mine that I've known for a couple of years. We go way back to like 2019. And her name is Barb Ranck. And Barb is, she is the founder of excuse me, I'm going to start over on that. I'll just start completely over, so it'll be easier for my editor. This is the Superhero Sidekick Leadership. Excuse me. Sorry. It's tough when you do a radio program and this. I get them mixed up. All right, here we go.
All right, take two.
This is the Superhero Sidekick Coaching Podcast. I am Joel Smith. My co-host, Joe Baker, is not present with us today. He is off probably climbing a mountain with his son. In the virtual studio today, I have a friend of mine. Her name is Barb Ranck, and she's the founder of Courageously Imperfect Coaching and Development. You can find her at cilifecoach.com. And Barb, so it's great to have you on the program. I know we've done a number of things together. We've had you on the radio program, and you've spoken to our Truth Business Network group. So how are you doing today?
Good, Joel. It's great to see you, especially during COVID. Just always good to see people that we can talk about things like we're going to talk about today. So thank you for the opportunity.
It was funny, earlier on, probably last year, you and I were on a number of Zoom calls over and over. Every week we were seeing each other and talking and connecting. And then we had you on the radio program live in person, and walked in. I didn't think anything of it. And then you looked at me and you said something like, "You look the same in person." And it just dawned on me that you and I hadn't even met in person at that time. That was funny, but felt like we had known each other pretty well. So, Barb, I am always fascinated whenever I get to talk with you, because you're really good at what you do, and you bring a lot of experience to the table when it comes to coaching. And for me, I really like to hear what you teach and talk about, because you have kind of a niche for personal awareness. And I love that. And that's one of the cornerstones of coaching, is to really help people with awareness about themselves. And that's one of your strengths that I've seen when I've watched you. You're like, and you love that. You just get giddy about this stuff. So, but tell us today what you'd like to talk about. Or maybe before we do that, why don't you tell us just a little bit about your coaching program and yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'll start with kind of what I'm doing now, and then back up into what led me here, because that's really the purpose and why I'm so passionate about what I do. So currently I am a certified life coach, but I also do training and facilitation. And ultimately, I come in and help people where they just want to improve their communication skills. Whatever they were using or whatever they've learned got them so far, but they're just running into situations that it's not working as well, or not working at all. So, help me understand what else is out there. Well, that then carries over into relationships. The better we can communicate, the better relationships we're going to have with others, spouses, families, coworkers, but honestly, including ourselves. So you mentioned, kind of becoming self-aware. I'm very passionate about listening to how we speak to ourselves, and creating a process and some tools to really figure that out, because that helps us understand what creates our own anxiety, what creates our own reactions to what's out there. And the more that we can get clear on that together, again, you'll just have better outcomes. So for me personally, I'm someone that loves to work, and I like the feeling of accomplishing tasks or putting on training events or whatever it was. So that was what I did for 23 years in my corporate career. And I I really enjoyed what I did. I loved the people I worked with. And yet I got to a certain point after 20 years and I'm like, gosh, what's missing? What is missing here? And, what was missing was relationships, connection, stuff outside of work where I could be fully present and just understand how to just be. And I know that sounds kind of woo-woo. It sounded woo-woo to me too, but through my certification in life coaching, that's what gave me the additional set of tools to help me go from just working and doing, a human doing, to really turn into a human being and get both parts of myself in line, which has made all the difference in my life. So I then want to turn around and work with people who say, I want more of that, because I might be overly developed in one part of my life or underdeveloped in another part of my life, and I'm just ready to make a change. So those are the people I love to work with.
Oh, that's great. So what would you like to talk about today? I know you've got, I'm pretty excited about it, but I'll let you tell the listeners what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated with the brain. I have literally for 20 years when I learned about the amygdala and how that's kind of the creator of our fight or flight response and the prefrontal cortex and how that's our upper level thinking, but that's too academic for me. So how I've kind of broken it down, I want to talk about the two sides of our brain. And there's the rational side, and then there's the emotional side. And where are we more developed? And then where could we become more developed in order to get better outcomes? So those are the topics that I want to talk about today are related to the brain.
Excellent. I love those topics too. I really like, I really love psychology. I love the psychology of coaching and the psychology of work and all of that. Dr. Henry Cloud and John Townsend, those are some of my favorite authors. But all right, well, let's get started here. Let's hear about the two sides of the brain and teach us something, Barb.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the opportunity. So we are so familiar with computers and technology these days. So I'm going to use the analogy of our brains having certain operating systems. And I'm going to start with the rational side of our brain. I don't know if you'd call this the right, hemisphere. It's just, for me, this is just the part of our operating system that is really going to want to take in information. We're going to want to have experiences. We're going to want to have education, just a lot of that rational thinking type processes that really help us become good problem solvers. Or if we don't have enough information or education, then maybe we struggle with the problem solving. But it's really about how can we move forward rationally, practically, pragmatically, and that's an important part of our brains. Now, this part of our brain also values efficiency and effectiveness. So not only how can we fix this, but how can we fix it really quickly so we can move on and get back to whatever we were doing before.
Yeah, the rational brain can be a little bit impatient at times. They just want to get things done.
Just want to get things done, but for the right reasons, because there's a problem, so let's solve it, and then that makes us feel good. So there's that certain sense of immediate gratification that can come with being a fixer, being a problem solver. Now, again, that's just one side of our brain and then truly one side of ourselves. So if we become over fixers or over problem solvers, that can actually work against us instead of for us. The other thing about myself, I'll just speak for myself, but I love learning. I love learning, and especially about the brain. So with our rational side, it could also lead us to wanting to take in too much information or just keep going down rabbit holes that ultimately we're going to end up in the place where it's just a little bit more of what we learned before. But our brains are going to tell us, you need to have the next certification. You need to have the next level of whatever it is so that you can be the most competent. But what is that really getting us? When are we at a point where we know enough where we're ready to give back? And if we don't ask ourselves those questions, we overdevelop our rational brain. And quite frankly, we're too smart for our own good.
Oh man, you're speaking right to me right now. This is one of those.
Tell me more.
If you were to have some of the, listen in on some of the conversations I have with my wife and I, that is me sometimes. I just sometimes information, I go a little bit further. I need to know more
Mhm.
details, and really I don't. That's just how I think. And so, but I am aware of it, and so I'm able to work on it and get better at it. But
Mhm.
it took a while before I really realized
Mhm.
that man, sometimes I can just ask too many questions, and or maybe wait too long to make a decision because I'm waiting
Mhm.
for more
Yeah.
information to come in, and I just don't need
Yeah.
any more information. I just need to
Mhm.
decide and go and get started. But
Right.
yeah, so I can
That's
definitely
I
relate.
call that the analysis paralysis.
Yep.
It's when we get stuck in the overuse of the rational brain that it can actually work against us. And how do we check in with ourselves and really know that that line between I want it because I know it's going to get me to a better outcome, or this is the only way I've ever done it, so I'm going to keep doing it even if this isn't going to get me where I'm going.
Yeah, I found that one of the best things you can do, if you do think like that, is just surround yourself with people that think differently, that
Mhm.
can hold you accountable and help point it out to you, and kind of counterbalance you a little bit. So
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah.
So that brings us then to the second part of our brain. This is the emotional brain system. And ideally, these two parts are working hand in hand, but kind of like with physical exercise or anything that we're specializing in, we could become overdeveloped in one area and not develop the other area as much. And I'll again speak for myself personally. I didn't know how to get what tools were useful on this side of my brain because I was so used to using my rational productive side just to get stuff done. So this is where in my career, in my relationships, I would hit a certain wall and be like, okay, I arrived. Now what? And I was always feeling empty inside. Well, a lot of it now I realize was because I had not then taken the time to build up my emotional brain. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah,
All right.
when I think of the emotional brain, I think that I guess maybe I used to think like this, but I used to think that the emotional brain just gets you in trouble, that you got
Mhm.
to think your way out of problems.
For
But
sure.
now I realize that, boy, we really do need that emotional part, because
Mhm.
without that, we're pretty dry and we run
Yeah.
into trouble. So whatever you're going to say next is probably going to sting a little bit for me, but go ahead. I'm ready for it.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up because there there's that perception for a reason, right? Like don't just rely on your emotions, they're going to get you in trouble. I would say yes, if they're coming from the lower part or the judged part of your emotional brain. So now I get into there's two parts to the emotional brain. One of them is fight or flight, react, don't critically think about anything. And whatever emotion comes up, it's going to come from that lower part of the emotional brain unless we have trained it to move into the higher functioning part of the emotional brain. And that's a journey and that's kind of messy and that's hard, just like working out the first time. If you haven't done it for a while, you're sore for 2 days afterward, then you don't ever want to try it again. so, so with coaching and with my own experiences, this is what was missing. I was way overdeveloped on rational. On my emotional side, I was almost stuck in the lower functioning fight or flight, freeze or appease. And so it wasn't running on all cylinders. So as I describe these two parts, I'm going to give them names just because that's easier to think about. So the emotional brain has the two parts, and the first one I'm going to talk about is the judge. So the judge is what is going to show up every time, first on the scene, right? Kind of like an ambulance. Oh no, I'm feeling vulnerable. I'm feeling scared or uncertain in the situation.
The first responder that needs to do the vital signs, right?
Exactly. Your first responder is always going to be your judge. And what the judge is going to do is it's going to try to quickly assess what emotion do I need right now. And when you're in fear, just like in animals, you're either going to fight or you're going to flee or you're going to try to get out of there. That may or may not be the right response, but until we know how our brains are working, we're going to choose one of those two things.
Well, it sounds like the
Uh,
judge may be uh, very protective of self. Would you say
very,
that? Yep.
yes. And how the judge protects is it applies the blame game, is what I like to call it. Blame and shame is how the judge protects. So you may not even realize it, but when you're in the lower part of your emotional brain, this is where you are going to judge others, or blame others, blame the situation, or blame yourself. And at the beginning of this show, I talked about how much talking we actually do to ourselves. Do we recognize how much when we get into an emotional, um, a space of unsafety or uncertainty, how often do we blame the other person? It's their fault. It's their fault. I can't possibly be okay in this situation. If only they would do something different, I can be okay only if they. Or the situation. I can't believe it rained on graduation day. I had everything else planned. It's going to ruin the whole thing. I'm going to blame the situation.
Yeah.
And notice the energy that's coming behind this, right?
Yeah, it's anxiety because you're kind of sabotaging the future because you're stuck in the in the negative of the present. Yeah. Barb, this reminds me a little bit of the drama triangle. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the drama triangle where you got the villain who's pointing a finger at whatever isn't right. It can be circumstances, it could be other people. And then you got the, the victim role, where and we fluctuate back and forth. And what you were just talking about with the judge, it sounds like the judge can point a finger, but the judge can also say, oh, it's not my fault, can kind of play the role of the victim as well. But
yes.
So yeah, that's a whole nother presentation, but
well, but now it feeds into when I can judge someone else as wrong, then my rational brain's going to kick in and give you the 17 reasons why they're wrong and why I can't possibly. And it's going to come from a very rational, overdeveloped side of our brain. But it's because our emotional side doesn't know how to process that any differently. And so it's the cycle of short-term problem solving, but it doesn't actually get us past that to curiosity, to being open to another person, being open to being influenced, quite frankly.
Yep. Curiosity and creativity, trying to think of things outside of the box instead of what's hurting inside the box, and solution-based thinking. Yeah, I can see how the judge isn't necessarily the best problem solver necessarily.
It's our default operating system for the emotional brain, and we haven't had a lot of tools or training to discuss that in groups or with each other. So that's where we've just kind of been over processing or over developing our rational brain with the 5 easy steps or the 2 quick tips, which I will actually give some tips, but they're going to take some time to develop. So
would you say that maybe in our day and age with a lot of therapists, sometimes obviously we know that there's going to be good therapists and there's going to be some therapists that aren't as successful. Do you think in the world of therapy and in counseling, maybe there's a lot of dealing with the symptoms of this as opposed to maybe really getting to the root of it? I think I see that. I see a lot of that going on. People really dealing with the feelings of the moment and maybe calming down and getting their head straight, but nothing really changes because they're still using the same parts of their brain as they were before.
Operating system, right?
Yeah.
And in counseling, at least my understanding of counseling, let's go back and keep going back and trying to figure out this 1 or 2, the experiences from your past that are causing that. And my philosophy is, let's just accept that your current operating system is this, right? And it's going to be triggered by a variety of things that could change every day, but let's watch for the patterns. And now let's override your system or develop new code that this can take you from this point to wherever you want to go in the future. We don't need to go back and discuss all of that unless it's important, but let's just actually look at the process of how your brain works. And that's where I have tools, assessments, models, language, to talk about this in more of a corporate type environment or something that doesn't come with as much kind of stigma, I guess, as counseling.
Excellent. All right. So tell us about this other part. I'm looking at the notes here, so I'm kind of chomping at the bit for you to talk about this. I love this next part.
Before I get there was one other judge portion that I did not discuss. I talked about when we're blaming others or blaming the situation. The third one is actually the most destructive, and it's when we blame ourselves. And so those are those things where I can't believe I did this. Why am I here again? I'm so, wrong. I always do that. That is another version of judging. And that I think is just the most destructive because you really feel helpless or hopeless.
Right.
And you kick into rational.
And our self-image and what we think of ourselves really drives everything that we do going forward.
Right.
It's the foundation. Right. Yeah, that's true.
And then what goes along with all of those emotions? It's really strong physical reactions, right? You get tense or you get flushed, or maybe you just feel heavy. And again, our brains are causing a lot of those physiological reactions because we're not catching our emotional brain in the act. So,
Yeah.
so what's the second part of our emotional brain? This is the what's called the prefrontal cortex, but it's the pathways in the front part of our brain that once we can get beyond that, the lower part of our brain, fight or flight, these pathways actually open us up to questioning our own thoughts. And not only that, but really listening to other people and saying, I wonder why they're saying it that way, or I wonder why they care about that thing so much. Because if they're expressing a strong emotion, it's tied to their emotional brain, but they're probably speaking in a very rational way. So as we move forward in that higher part of our brain, this is where empathy is the source of empathy. And empathy is the ability to take another person's position, or at least see where they could be coming from, even if we don't agree with it. Like I can at least get into a space of, Joel, I can't imagine what it's like to be a white male in today's society, but maybe if you tell me more, I can at least come and come closer to your perspective and understand that a little better. And then vice versa, I could let you in on what it's like to be a white Midwest female.
Sure.
So, but we have to be willing to create that space of curiosity. Tell me more. I'll give you a personal example on this one. I work with anti-human trafficking efforts here in the state of Iowa, specifically Des Moines. And when I first learned about this, first it's overwhelming because you're like, what is this and how could this be happening? And then the second thing my rational brain did was to say, well, but they're prostitutes. So obviously they chose this and they got it in a bad situation and they made bad choices. So therefore this is, yeah, that makes sense. But then the empathy side of me was like, what else could be going on? And let me at least be open to finding out more. And then what you realize is if it is truly sex trafficking, none of these people are earning any of the money that they are being forced to earn. So therefore, if you're not earning that money, it's more like slavery than a choice. And I'm just giving that really brief example, but that is what opened my eyes to empathy, to now want to be a coach, even with survivors when they get to the point of seeing that they have a future.
Sure.
And it all starts with that upper portion of the emotional brain.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Yeah. And, it's interesting how, you brought up a topic that is taboo in some people's minds. Some people just would rather not think about it because it hurts, and they may not have that peace in their mind, in their brain working with empathy. It's so much easier just to kind of point a finger and say, well, you shouldn't have been hanging out on the streets by yourself then. It's so much easier to do that than it is to allow yourself to feel a certain way that's uncomfortable. And really, empathy, if you're going to be really good at being a great listener, a person that is compassionate, a person that really has a lot of empathy, you're going to have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable with your feelings if you're going to connect with people. But if you just seal yourself off and you try to avoid uncomfortable feelings, you're just going to go to that rational brain most of the time, aren't you? Yeah.
Rational, and then the lower part of emotional, which is, I don't want to feel this, let's just move on. Which it's
True.
So you mentioned the big word. This is the other big thing that comes from your sage part of your emotional brain, or your upper part. It's compassion. It's compassion. So not only can I have compassion for people who I don't understand, but who aren't like me, but we're all humans, we're going through the same thing. But I need to have compassion for myself if I don't have the capacity to take on all the aspects of what human trafficking really is and feel compelled to do anything about it, right? That's not everyone's journey. So having compassion, just to say, I think that would be a tough situation, but I just can't go there right now. And I'm not going to beat myself up, and I'm not going to blame others for the situation. I'm just going to respect that that's where I'm at right now. That's the higher part of your emotional brain.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. I like in your notes here, you talk about self-regulation and creativity as well with the sage. Talk about that a little bit. How does self-regulation, how does that play into the sage part?
I have a perfect example. As I've been practicing this, I don't think you ever become a master. It's just always a work in progress. So I've been working on, overcoming the reactional part of my brain for a long time. And I work really fast, so it's hard to slow down and really recognize it in the moment. But this past weekend, I'm now my own business owner, so I get to do all my own IT. And my computer was not connecting to my printer. And my husband just needed me to print one thing on a Sunday, and I couldn't do it. And I immediately went into just blaming everything. I'm like, this stupid computer, and why I can't believe, and I'm gonna have to Google it, and everything I Googled sent me on 3 rabbit trails. And I'm like, why can't this just be easy? And on and on. And I heard myself doing it, and I was like, oh, this is an overreaction to the situation. There are many other solutions to get this thing printed. Why am I so gung-ho on solving this problem right now in this way? And so what I did was I actually recognized cortisol was flowing all through my body, which is the stress hormone. And to combat that, you actually just get up and walk around, take a lap, or rub your hands together, or start deep breathing, just something to physiologically reverse the natural reaction to your lower emotional brain. And through that, I came back and I was like, okay, I'm going to give myself compassion, because well, first of all, I'm going to applaud myself for not actually saying a lot of things that were in my head out loud.
Yep.
So that's self-regulation. Secondly, it was recognize that this is not a big deal. In the scheme of things, 5 years from now, not a big deal. I have solved this in the past, so I know I'm going to solve it in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, he found another way to print it that got me off the hook in that moment. So that is an example of self-regulation in real time.
It's amazing to me how dire the moment seems when you're in it. You just think, oh my goodness, this is so hard. And you're so afraid of what's gonna happen. Your mind wanders and you're thinking, and then, but realistically, when you look back over your life at the toughest times in your life, one thing that really stands out is those tougher times really usually weren't as hard as you thought they were going to be. Now, obviously, some of us go through suffering, and we go through some things, and I'm not talking about those things. I'm talking about all of those things in between that we think are going to be devastating, but we look back, we think, no big deal. What really wasn't a big deal. In fact, some of those things they're really valuable because you learn from them. So, yeah.
Well, if you can get to your upper part of your emotional brain, which says this was a gift, right? This thing helped you learn this other thing that you wouldn't have known otherwise. And now you can build that into your rational brain's experience system to operate on both sides, to just operate fully from both systems. And if I go back to what led me out of corporate America into this job, was my whole journey of I was over rational like crazy, and I was getting promoted because I could do the work and I liked to work, but then I would get to the top and I'm like, this just doesn't feel, it feels empty. But it was because I wasn't taking time to develop relationships. And ultimately, I didn't know how to get vulnerable at all, or well. It was messy. There was crying involved. And I'm just laughing every time I say that. A lot of people are like, crying's natural. It wasn't natural to me. I was so rational. And so we don't need emotions to get the job done. And that's just where I started. So for me on my journey to become a life coach, it helped me understand these tools and skills. I want to now help as many people who want my help, but it's hard. And so I go back to courageously imperfect, admitting and acknowledging every day that I don't know as much as other people. I'm going to get this wrong every once in a while, whatever that means, but I still have to do it. I still want to try. And that takes courage.
I love that the name of your company, because first of all, it really makes a statement. It means if you want to grow, you don't have to be perfect, but you do have to be courageous.
Yeah.
I mean, you really do. You have to be courageous to move yourself to the next level and to let go of some things, let go of some emotions, let go of some things that may be idols in your life.
Bad habits. Bad habits. Things that you picked up that worked in a season but really aren't sustainable, and you didn't know any different. So don't beat yourself up, but learn the things that are going to be sustainable. And just like with a physical trainer at the gym, they're there to encourage and support you when it's going to get hard. You're going to be all sweaty and complaining. That is what a life coach does when you're trying out these tools, that you're going to be complaining and sweaty and it's going to be hard. But they get energy off that, and they want you to become the best version of yourself.
Yeah, that's right. And one thing I would say about Barb, about what you and I do, we're not really in the business of coaching. We're in the business of transformation. Am I right?
For sure.
Because,
yeah, for sure.
Because we're not trying to just be a coach. It's not about what we can be. It's about what happens when people are helped in a way that helps to open up their mind, consider different ideas, and realize the truth of the situation, and have the ability to let go of those lies they've been telling themselves all their life. And then people grow, people get out of those ruts. They start forming new ruts and start developing new habits and new, better ways of thinking. And some people really have the idea that I'm broken and I'm never going to get fixed. And the message that you bring to everyone is that no, maybe you are broken, but you can be fixed. You can be healed. You can be helped. And even if you're not fully healed, you can learn ways to adapt so that whatever this is doesn't have to control your life. So I love that.
I'm smiling on a couple of levels, because you use the word like healed and broken, and those are very emotionally triggering words, right? So you probably just sent half the audience into the lower part of their emotional brain, because those words are scary, and I don't want to touch that. How I would think of it, think of your brain as a muscle, right? And you have now overdeveloped your rational brain. So picture your biceps and you're all buff up there, right? But you have scrawny legs if you have not developed the emotional part of your brain.
I've seen people in the gym like that.
But it's just they picked what to specialize in, and now they're kind of half developed in an area. So again, I will use all the words, but I just say your muscles have atrophied and you just didn't have the skills or know what the next step was. And so let's get those muscles balanced again. And it's going to be an overnight process. So.
Well, hey, Barb, this has been great. I always love speaking with you and talking with you. How would our listeners get a hold of you if they want to learn more about CI coaching and what you do, or request your services?
Yep. So I'm out on LinkedIn the most, and that is under my name, Barb Ranck, Ranck. But I'm also on Facebook under Courageously Imperfect, and then I do have a website, CILifecoach.com. My direct email is barb@CILifecoach.com.
Excellent. All right. Well, hey, Barb, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. It's always good to have you on the program, and I'd like to have you on the program again here real soon.
Yeah, that'd be great. I look forward to it.
Maybe we can talk about the Enneagram, because I know you love that too. So that's good.
One of my other favorites. Yes.
All right. Well, hey, thank you everybody for tuning in. We want to encourage you to subscribe to our podcast. Go out to superherosidekick.com and learn more about what we do. Learn about Joe Baker's coaching business. Go out to joelsmithcoach.com. I would love to have you come check out what I do as well. I'm an empowerment coach. I love to help people get better at what they do and who they are, so that they can help other people as well. So anyway, we so appreciate you listening in, and give us some feedback and some comments, and we will see you on the next program. Thanks.